My stepmom kicked me out because my dog chewed her designer purse, but soon, thanks to that dog, I got $35 million. The cold Chicago wind hit my face as I stood on the porch of what used to be my home. My dad closed the door without even looking me in the eyes, his final words hanging in the air between us. "You made your choice, Jake." I clutched my worn backpack in one hand and Rocky's leash in the other, watching as my chocolate lab whimpered softly, sensing something was terribly wrong. I took a deep breath and whispered to him, "It's just you and me now, buddy." I never thought I'd be homeless at 19, not with a 4.0 GPA and what everyone called a bright future. But life has this funny way of testing what you're really made of when you least expect it. And sometimes those tests come in the form of a 70-pound chocolate Labrador with sad eyes and a tail that never stops wagging. Rocky wasn't just any dog. He was the last gift my mom ever gave me. 2 years ago, on my 17th birthday, Mom brought home this tiny ball of brown fur that immediately peed on my favorite sneakers. She was already sick then, but her smile when she handed me that puppy was the brightest I'd seen in months. "He'll teach you how to love, even when the world turns its back on you," she told me that day. I didn't fully understand what she meant until after she was gone, just 14 months later. Those nights after the funeral were the darkest of my life. Dad shut down completely, burying himself in work and whiskey. But Rocky, that dog would climb into my bed every night, pressing his warm body against mine while I cried myself to sleep. Sometimes I swear he cried with me. He was the only living piece of Mom I had left, the only one who seemed to remember her the way I did. Things might have stayed that way forever, me, Dad, and Rocky in our silent house of grief, if Linda hadn't come along. Dad met her at some corporate retreat 6 months after Mom died. "She makes me feel alive again," he told me, as if that explained everything. Linda moved in 3 months later and married Dad before the year was out. She was everything Mom wasn't: loud, meticulously put together, and obsessed with appearances. I tried to like her. Really, I did, for Dad's sake. But Linda made it clear from day one that Rocky and I were inconveniences she was tolerating, not family members she was embracing. "That dog is shedding all over my new Pottery Barn rug," she complained, sipping her soy milk latte while scrolling through her Instagram feed. "And I think I'm developing an allergy. My skincare routine costs $300 a month. I can't afford puffy eyes." I started keeping Rocky in my room more, walking him extra long to tire him out, so he'd sleep quietly. I even bought one of those expensive vacuum cleaners, specifically for pet hair, but nothing was ever good enough for Linda. The real trouble started when Dad gave her a platinum Amex for her birthday. Suddenly our house was filled with shopping bags from stores I'd never even heard of, clothes with French names I couldn't pronounce, shoes that cost more than my community college tuition. I came home from class one Thursday to find Linda standing in the living room, face red with rage, holding what remained of her Louis Vuitton handbag. Rocky sat in the corner, tail between his legs, looking guilty as hell. $3,000, she screamed, waving the chewed leather in my face. "This bag cost $3,000, and your mutt destroyed it." Dad just stood there, looking torn and miserable. He'd never been good at confrontation, even before Mom died. Linda knew exactly how to play him. "It's me or the dog, Richard," she said, turning to my father with tears in her eyes. "I can't live like this anymore. That animal has to go." My heart stopped. Rocky had chewed things before: my headphones, a textbook, even my favorite Nikes. But I'd never once thought about getting rid of him. He was family. He was Mom. "Dad," I started, but Linda cut me off. "Or Jake can take the dog and leave," she added with a shrug. "He's old enough to get his own place anyway. Most kids his age aren't still living at home rent-free." The silence that followed told me everything I needed to know. Dad wasn't going to stand up for me or for Rocky. His new life with Linda was more important than Mom's memory or his own son. That night, I lay on my bed with Rocky's head on my chest, remember what Mom had told me once when we found an injured bird in our backyard. "Love means choosing to protect those who can't protect themselves," she'd said as we carefully placed the bird in a shoebox lined with an old T-shirt. By morning, I had made my decision. I packed what I could fit into my backpack. Some clothes, my laptop, the photo album of Mom, and Rocky's favorite toys. Dad caught me at the door and handed me an envelope with $200 cash. "I'm sorry, son," he whispered, not meeting my eyes. "Maybe once Rocky is older and calmer." I shook my head. "Don't worry about it, Dad. You made your choice too." Finding a place to stay when you're 19 with no credit history, minimal savings, and a large dog is basically impossible. I spent that first day going from apartment to apartment, watching landlords' faces fall when Rocky bounded into view. "Is that a dog or a small horse?" One asked, backing away like Rocky might eat him. Another simply stated, "No pets," before I could even open my mouth. By evening, I was sitting on a bench in Humboldt Park, sharing a hot dog with Rocky and wondering if my Honda Civic was big enough for both of us to sleep in. That's when Marge found us. She was walking her two huskies, massive fluffy beasts named Thor and Loki, when Rocky barked a friendly hello. Instead of hurrying past like most people, she stopped. "Those are some sad eyes for such a handsome young man," she said, and I wasn't sure if she was talking to me or Rocky. She was in her 70s, with wild gray hair and the kind of weathered face that suggested she'd seen it all. Dogs usually reflect their owner's emotions, you know. Before I knew it, I was telling the stranger my whole story. About Mom, about Linda, about being kicked out with nowhere to go. Marge listened without interrupting, just nodding occasionally. "Humans are complicated creatures," she said when I finished. "Dogs are much simpler. They don't lie, they don't cheat, and they don't abandon those they love." She pulled a set of keys from her pocket. "I've got a garage apartment behind my place in Oak Park. It's not fancy, but it's clean and there's a fenced yard. You two can stay there until you figure things out." I tried to refuse, to explain that I couldn't accept such generosity from a stranger, but Marge waved me off. "I've been where you are, kid, different circumstances. Same result. Alone with my dogs and nowhere to go. Someone helped me once. Now I'm helping you. That's how the world should work." The apartment was tiny, basically one room with a bathroom attached and a kitchenette in the corner, but it was warm and the yard was perfect for Rocky. Marge refused to take any money, only asking that I help with her grocery shopping since these old knees don't handle the stairs so well anymore. I found a job waiting tables at a diner, called Joe's about a mile away. The pay was terrible, but they let me work the breakfast and lunch shifts so I could take classes at night. I'd come home exhausted, but Rocky was always waiting, tail wagging like I was the greatest thing he'd ever seen. Every night, I'd look at Mom's picture before bed and whisper, "We're okay. Rocky's okay. I'm keeping my promise." Life settled into a routine. Work, school, walks with Rocky, helping Marge. It wasn't exactly the future I planned, but we were surviving. Rocky even made friends with Thor and Loki, the three of them racing around the yard like furry tornadoes while Marge and I drank coffee on her back porch. "You know," she told me one morning, "my neighbor's son works at that fancy steakhouse downtown, the Golden Fork. Says they're looking for servers. Tips are apparently insane." I nearly choked on my coffee. The Golden Fork was the kind of place where people spent more on a bottle of wine than I made in a week. The waiters there wore suits and could probably recite the entire wine list from memory. They'd never hire me. I laughed. I can barely pronounce half the items on their menu. Marge shrugged. "Won't know unless you try. And frankly, kid, you need the money. Rocky ate through another one of your textbooks yesterday." She wasn't wrong. My meager savings were dwindling fast between school expenses and keeping Rocky fed. So the next day, I borrowed one of Marge's late husband's suits, slightly outdated but better than my only dress shirt with its coffee stains, printed out a resume that stretched the truth about my extensive customer service experience, and headed downtown. I expected to be laughed out of the place. Instead, the manager, a stern-looking guy named Frank with slick back hair and a permanent frown, gave me a once-over and said, "We're short-staffed for the holiday season. I can give you a 2-week trial. You screw up, you're out. Wine knowledge test on Monday. Don't be late." I practically floated home. The base pay was twice what I made at Joe's, and Frank said servers regularly took home $200 to $300 in tips on a good night. This could change everything. I could save for a real apartment, maybe even transfer to a 4-year college next fall. When I got back to the garage apartment, Rocky greeted me with his usual enthusiasm, nearly knocking me over in his excitement. I knelt down and hugged him tight, his warm dog breath in my face. "Things are looking up, buddy," I told him. Maybe life isn't over after all. As I said those words, I felt a flicker of hope for the first time since standing on my father's porch with everything I owned in a backpack. Rocky and I had made it this far. Perhaps the worst was behind us. I had no idea how wrong I was, or that Rocky would soon both destroy and save my future in ways I could never have imagined. Working at the Golden Fork was like stepping into another universe, one where people casually dropped $80 on a steak and didn't blink when ordering a $200 bottle of wine to go with it. The kind of place where you'd spot Chicago Bulls players or local news anchors any given night, acting like it was no big deal to spend more on dinner than my monthly rent. My first week, there was a crash course in pretending I belonged. I practiced pronouncing foie gras and bouillabaisse in the mirror every morning, smiling like I was some character from Dynasty instead of community college kid from the South Side who'd never eaten anything fancier than Olive Garden. It's pronounced croissant, not croissant. Frank corrected me during training, rolling his eyes like I personally offended his ancestors. And for God's sake, hold a wine glass by the stem, not the bowl. You're serving Chateau Margaux, not Kool-Aid. But I was a quick learner, and the money was incredible. My first weekend, I walked out with $430 in tips alone. The second weekend, almost $600. I started making plans. Maybe I could afford a real apartment by summer, one where Rocky and I wouldn't be charity cases. Maybe I could even transfer to Northwestern next fall, if I saved enough. There was just one problem. Rocky, don't get me wrong, he was still my best friend, my family, my connection to Mom. But leaving him alone in Marge's garage apartment for 10-hour shifts wasn't working out. He started howling the minute I left, a mournful wolf-like sound that carried through the neighborhood. "It's breaking my heart too, kid," Marge told me after the third day. "But Mrs. Greenberg next door works nights at the hospital. She needs to sleep during the day. I'll figure something out, I promised." Mrs. Greenberg left a polite note on my door the next day. The day after that, another neighbor mentioned calling animal control if that noise didn't stop. I tried everything. Extra long morning walks, puzzle toys filled with peanut butter, even a TV left on for company. Nothing worked. Rocky had separation anxiety, and he wasn't subtle about it. My shift schedule was getting better as I proved myself at the Golden Fork, but I still worked at least 4 dinner services a week, which meant being gone from 3 p.m. until after midnight. Too long for any dog, but especially for a lab who'd already lost one person he loved. The solution came to me on a Tuesday afternoon as I was helping the maintenance guy fix a broken wine rack in the restaurant storage room. It was a small space, maybe 10 by 12 feet, tucked away in the back of the restaurant. No windows, but air-conditioned and quiet, filled with wine boxes and extra linens. No one comes back here during service except to grab wine, Tony explained as we worked. Frank's too busy running the floor, and the chefs never leave the kitchen. An idea, a crazy, desperate, absolutely terrible idea, started forming in my head. That Friday, I brought Rocky to work. I waited until the pre-service staff meal, when everyone was in the dining room, then snuck him through the back delivery entrance and into the storage room. I'd brought his bed, a bowl of water, and enough treats to keep a small army of dogs happy. "You have to be quiet as a mouse," I whispered, holding his face between my hands and looking into his eyes. "If anyone finds you, we're both out on the street. Understand?" Rocky licked my face, which I chose to interpret as agreement. For 3 weeks, the arrangement worked perfectly. Rocky was so happy to be near me that he stayed quiet in the storage room. I'd sneak back every hour or so, let him out briefly when I could into the alley behind the restaurant. After closing, I'd take him for a long walk before we headed home. I should have known it couldn't last. In my experience, happiness always comes with an expiration date. It was a Saturday night, our busiest evening, with every table booked and a private party in the back room. The mayor was rumored to be coming in, and Frank was more high-strung than usual, barking orders and adjusting table settings that were already perfect. Table 12 wants the 2008 Opus 1. He told me around 8 p.m. It's in the back storage room, top shelf. My stomach dropped. I've been avoiding sending anyone to the storage room for 3 weeks, volunteering to get wine myself whenever needed. But there was no way to offer now without seeming suspicious. I'll get it, I said casually, hoping I could sneak in and out before Frank found someone else. I was too late. As I rounded the corner to a hallway leading to storage, I saw Frank himself heading toward the door, key in hand. I broke into a jog. I've got it, Frank. You're needed at the host stand. Something about the mayor's security detail. He hesitated, then nodded and handed me the key. Don't keep table 12 waiting. They spend more here in a month than you make a year. I waited until he disappeared, then slipped into the storage room, heart pounding. Rocky was curled up on his bed, but the moment he saw me, he jumped up, tail wagging like a metronome on fast forward. "Shoo, buddy, quiet," I whispered, grabbing the wine while trying to settle him down. "I'll be back soon." As I turned to leave, I heard it, a soft, high-pitched meow from outside the delivery entrance door. Rocky's head snapped toward the sound, his entire body going rigid. Before I could grab his collar, he bolted toward the door, which I'd stupidly failed to fully close in my rush. "Rocky, no." I hissed, but it was too late. He was gone, charging down the hallway like a furry missile. What happened next still plays in my mind in slow motion, like one of those disaster scenes in a movie where everything goes catastrophically wrong in the most spectacular way possible. Rocky burst into the main dining room just as Miguel, our best server, was carrying a tray loaded with 3 lobster dinners and a bottle of Dom Perignon toward the mayor's table. Miguel saw Rocky. Rocky saw the cat that had somehow wandered into the front door, and chaos ensued. Miguel went down first. The tray flying into the air in a graceful arc, lobster tails soar like tiny pink torpedoes. The champagne bottle hit the floor with a pop that sounded like a gunshot, sending a geyser of expensive bubbles into the air. Rocky, oblivious to destruction, continued his pursuit of the cat, weaving between tables of shocked diners. Mrs. Peterson, our 80-year-old regular who always ordered the same medium well filet, screamed and threw a martini in surprise. It landed on Mr. Abernathy, the Chicago Tribune food critic who'd been dining incognito at the next table. The cat, smarter than all of us, jumped onto the dessert cart, sending chocolate soufflés and creme brulees crashing to the floor. Rocky followed, his paws leaving chocolatey prints across the pristine white tablecloth of table 7, where a man had been in the middle of proposing to his girlfriend. By the time I caught up and grabbed Rocky's collar, the dining room looked like a war zone. Frank stood in the center of it all, his face turning a shade of purple I'd never seen on a human being before. "You," he said, pointing a shaking finger at me. "Outside. Now." The firing was quick and merciless. Frank didn't even ask for an explanation, which was fair. There was really no explaining why a Labrador was demolishing his 5-star restaurant on the busiest night of the week. "You're fired. Your dog is fired. If I had the power, I'd have your future children fired too." He handed me an envelope with my final paycheck, minus $300 for damages. "Consider yourself lucky I'm not charging you for the emotional distress of our guests." Walking out of the Golden Fork for the last time, Rocky trotting happily beside me like he hadn't just torpedoed my career, I felt a wave of anger I'd never experienced before. "Do you have any idea what you just did?" I asked him when we reached the sidewalk. "Do you know how many dreams you just shattered? How many opportunities you cost us?" Rocky looked up at me with those big brown eyes, completely clueless about the disaster he'd caused. And just like that, my anger melted away. It wasn't his fault. He was just being a dog, loyal, loving, and completely ruled by instinct. "I chose you," I sighed, kneeling down to hug him. "I'd choose you again. But man, you are the most expensive decision I've ever made." I checked my phone on the train ride home. 3 missed calls from Marge, probably wondering why I was coming home early. My final paycheck was $1,200, not bad for 2 weeks of work, even with the damages taken out. But it wouldn't last long. And who knew when I'd find another job that paid this well? We were walking the last few blocks to Marge's place when Rocky suddenly jerked his head to the left. There on the corner was a small booth with a sign reading, Mega Millions, Jackpot $35 million. And there was the cat, the same orange tabby from the restaurant, somehow here in Oak Park, sitting smugly beside the lottery booth. Rocky lunged before I could tighten my grip on the leash. Rocky, no, not again. This time, the disaster was even more spectacular. Rocky charged, the cat dodged, and the entire booth went down like it was made of playing cards. A young woman with shoulder-length brown hair and wide blue eyes watched in horror as hundreds of lottery tickets scattered across the wet sidewalk, many landing in a large puddle left by the afternoon rain. "No!" she cried, dropping to her knees to gather the soaking wet tickets. "No, no, no!" I grabbed Rocky's collar and pulled him back. The cat, mission apparently accomplished, sauntered away with what I swear was a smirk on its face. "I am so sorry," I said, kneeling down to help collect the drenched tickets. "My dog." He has a thing about cats. The girl looked up at me, tears streaming down her face. I'm going to lose my job. These tickets, they're all ruined. I looked at the girl, then at Rocky, then back at the girl. Her name tag read Emily. She couldn't have been more than 20, and the terror in her eyes was all too familiar. It was the same fear I felt standing on my dad's porch, realizing I had nowhere to go. Mom's voice echoed in my head. Help others, even when you're struggling yourself. That's when it matters most. I took a deep breath and reached for my wallet. How much did you say the tickets cost? Let me check, she sniffled, quickly counting the ruined booklets. That's 7 full booklets plus 11 loose tickets, $835 total. She looked at her sales log to confirm. God, they're going to fire me. I can't afford to cover this. I pulled out the envelope of my final paycheck. I can cover it. All of it. Her eyes widened. What? No, you can't. That's insane. Probably, I agreed, counting out $835, more than 2/3 of everything I had in the world. But I've been doing a lot of insane things lately. Might as well keep the streak going. As I handed her the money, Rocky sat beside me, tail wagging, completely oblivious of the financial disaster he'd just caused. I ruffled his ears. Congratulations, buddy. You're officially the most expensive dog in Chicago. $835 for one chase. That's a new record. Emily insisted on giving me the wet tickets. They're yours now, she said. Some of them might still be valid if you can dry them out. The drawing's tomorrow night. I shoved the soggy pile into my jacket pocket, not having the heart to tell her I just spent my last dollar on paper that was dissolving into pulp. Back at Marge's garage apartment, I laid out the tickets on every dry surface I could find. The bed, the desk, the little coffee table. Most were unreadable. The numbers blurred beyond recognition, but a few dozen seemed salvageable. I borrowed Marge's hair dryer and got to work, carefully drying each one, trying not to laugh at the absolute absurdity of my situation. Fired from my dream job, and then broke again in the same night. All because of my dog. Flat broke, drying lottery tickets like they were precious documents. If this isn't fate, I'm officially the biggest idiot in Illinois, I told Rocky, who was curled up on the bed, watching me work with half-closed eyes. He thumped his tail in response, which I took as agreement on both counts. As I set the last batch of tickets aside to finish drying, I couldn't help but smile at how quickly life can change course. This morning, I'd been a rising star at the Golden Fork, envisioning a future where Rocky and I had our own place, where I finished college, where things finally went right. Now I was unemployed, nearly broke, and pinning my hopes on lottery tickets that had been soaked in street water. But somehow, I wasn't as devastated as I should have been. Maybe it was the way Emily had smiled when she thanked me, or the memory of Mom's voice reminding me what really mattered in life. Or maybe it was just Rocky, snoring softly on the bed, loyal and loving despite his talent for destruction. Whatever tomorrow brought, we'd face it together. And who knows, maybe those wet tickets would turn out to be worth something after all. I just had no idea how much. A week after the lottery ticket disaster, I was scraping the bottom of the financial barrel. My bank account had dwindled to a pathetic $47.82, and my prospects weren't looking any better. 3 job applications, 0 calls back. Turns out, getting fired from the Golden Fork had made the rounds in Chicago's restaurant scene. Frank had friends everywhere. My dinner that night was ramen noodles. The cheap kind that cost 29 cents a pack and probably takes a year off your life with each serving. Rocky sat beside me at the tiny kitchen table, his soulful brown eyes fixed on my sad excuse for a meal, a string of drool hanging from his mouth. "Sorry, buddy," I told him, sliding half my noodles into his bowl. "Looks like we're both on a budget diet for a while." Rocky didn't seem to mind the downgrade from premium dog food to discount ramen. That's the thing about dogs. They don't care if you live in a mansion or a garage apartment, as long as they're with you. People could learn a lot from that kind of loyalty. Marge stopped by that evening with a plate of her famous meatloaf and a concerned look on her face. She'd heard about the lottery ticket incident from Mrs. Greenberg, who'd seen the whole thing on her way home from her night shift. "You know, life is like a poker game," Marge said, watching me devour meatloaf like a man who hadn't seen real food in days. "Sometimes you gotta play the hand you're dealt, even when it's garbage." "Is that supposed to make me feel better?" I asked, my mouth full. She shrugged, "Just saying that every lousy hand has possibilities. Your mom knew that. Why do you think she gave you that dog?" I looked at Rocky, who was now trying to convince Marge he was starving to death and had never been fed in his entire life. Some days I wondered if Mom had known what she was setting me up for: homelessness, unemployment, and financial ruin, all because of a dog who couldn't resist chasing cats. But then I'd remember how her eyes lit up when she saw me with Rocky, even when she was at her sickest. How she'd whispered, "He'll love you when it's hardest to love yourself." And I knew she'd seen something I was still learning to see. The next morning, I dragged myself to Julasco to buy more ramen and look for the cheapest job listings in the newspaper. The store radio was playing the usual mix of 80s hits and announcements about sales in aisle 7, when a news update caught my attention. Last night's Mega Millions jackpot of $35 million remains unclaimed. The winning ticket was purchased in Oak Park, Illinois. The lucky numbers were 8, 15, 27, 33, 41, with a mega ball of 12. I froze in the middle of the cereal aisle, a box of discount cornflakes suspended in my hand. Oak Park, where Emily's lottery booth had been, where Rocky had created chaos, where I'd spent $835 on wet tickets. No, it couldn't be. That kind of thing didn't happen to people like me. It happened to retired grandmas in Florida or lucky college kids who bought their first ever ticket on a whim. But something made me abandon my shopping cart and sprint the 12 blocks back to Marge's place. I burst through the door of the garage apartment, startling Rocky from his nap. The stack of dried lottery tickets sat on my desk where I'd left them a week ago, forgotten in my desperate job hunt. Most were still unreadable, the numbers blurred beyond recognition. But a few dozen had survived Rocky's cat chase and my amateur drying attempts. "If you ate the winning ticket," I told Rocky as I began sorting through them, "I'm putting you on a strict kibble diet for life." Ticket after ticket. Loser. Loser. Numbers smudged. Loser. Halfway through the stack, I was starting to feel stupid for even hoping. This was just another wild goose chase, like thinking I could hide a Labrador in a wine storage room or build a future at the Golden Fork. Then I saw it. Ticket number 27 in my stack. Clear as day. 8, 15, 27, 33, 41. Mega ball 12. I checked again. Then a third time. I pulled up the Illinois lottery website on my phone to verify the numbers. They matched. All of them. The room started spinning. I sat down hard on the edge of my bed, the ticket clutched in my trembling hand. Rocky, sensing something was happening, trotted over and put his head in my lap. "We won," I whispered, my voice barely audible. Then louder, "We won." Rocky startled at my sudden shout, then started barking excitedly, feeding off my energy without understanding why. I grabbed him, hugging him so tightly he yelped. "Marge." I yelled, running from the garage apartment toward her house, waving the ticket like a lunatic. Marge. She came out onto her back porch, coffee mug in hand, Thor and Loki at her feet. What in God's name are you hollering about? Did you set something on fire? I thrust the ticket toward her, my hand still shaking. The lottery. Mega Millions. It's us. We won. Her eyes widened as she looked from the ticket to me and back again. Then, to my complete surprise, this 70-something woman let out a whoop that could have been heard 3 blocks away and started dancing on her back porch, both huskies howling along in perfect harmony. The next few days were a blur. After researching online, I learned I needed to sign the ticket immediately, which I did, in shaky handwriting. Make a copy, thanks to Marge's ancient printer, and find a secure place to keep it, inside a waterproof bag inside a lockbox Marge had in her closet. Then came the hard part. Finding someone who could help me claim the money without getting ripped off. Marge's nephew was a lawyer in downtown Chicago, specializing in real estate, but he recommended a colleague who dealt with sudden wealth cases. Joseph Abernathy's office was on the 47th floor of a gleaming skyscraper with a view of Lake Michigan that made me feel like I was floating. His suit probably cost more than my car, but his handshake was surprisingly down to earth. "So you're the dog guy," he said, gesturing for me to take a seat. My wife was at the Golden Fork that night. She said it was the most entertaining dinner they've had in years. My face burned with embarrassment. Not my finest moment. Joseph laughed. "Are you kidding?" She loved it. Said the stuffy place needed some shaking up. He leaned forward, suddenly all business. "Now about this ticket. I verified its authenticity with the Lottery Commission. It's real, and you got some decisions to make. Those decisions, it turned out, were complicated. I could take a lump sum payment, which would be about $24.5 million before taxes, or annual payments over 29 years. After federal and state taxes, the lump sum would net me around $22 million. $22 million, I repeated, the words feeling foreign in my mouth. That was more money than I could comprehend. More than most people see in a lifetime. It's a life-changing amount, Joseph agreed, which is why you need to be smart about this. Fame follows money, especially lottery money. By tomorrow, everyone in Chicago will know your name. He wasn't exaggerating. By the time I left his office, local news outlets had picked up the story. Lucky Oak Park resident wins $35 million after dog incident was already trending on Chicago news sites, though thankfully with minimal details about me personally. The media frenzy was immediate and overwhelming. Reporters camped outside Marge's house. My phone exploded with calls and texts from people in the neighborhood and former co-workers. Thankfully, I'd been smart enough to use a trust for the claim, keeping my full name out of the official announcements. The local news just described me as an Oak Park resident in his early 20s. At least my family wouldn't know. I wasn't ready for that conversation yet. I turned my phone off and huddled in the garage apartment with Rocky, feeling strangely vulnerable despite my new millionaire status. Fame, I was quickly learning, felt a lot like being naked in public. Your mom used to say something about money. Marge told me that night as we hid from reporters in her kitchen. She said, "Money doesn't change your heart. It just reveals it." I looked at her in surprise. "You knew my mom?" Marge smiled. "Book club. Every Thursday for 6 years. She talked about you all the time. So proud of her smart boy." She patted my hand. "She'd be even prouder now, seeing how you've handled things." I wasn't so sure about that. Getting kicked out and living in someone's garage wasn't exactly the American dream. But then again, maybe choosing loyalty over comfort, kindness over convenience, maybe that would have made Mom proud. With Joseph's help, I navigated the process of claiming my winnings. I chose the lump sum option, planning to invest most of it. The day the money hit my account, I stared at the balance on my phone screen for a full 5 minutes. All those zeros didn't seem real. Joseph had connected me with a financial advisor named Sarah Kim, a no-nonsense woman who looked about my age but spoke with the authority of someone who'd been managing millions for decades. "The first rule of sudden wealth," she told me during our initial meeting, "is to do nothing drastic for at least 6 months. No mansions, no sports cars, no private islands. What about helping the people who helped me? I asked, thinking of Marge and her leaky roof, of Emily who'd been so upset about the damaged tickets. Sarah smiled. That's different. Gratitude is always a good investment. She helped me set up a structure plan. 60% of my windfall went into a diverse portfolio of investments, 20% into safe, accessible accounts for immediate needs, 10% for real estate investments, and 10% for what she called my gratitude fund. The media attention intensified after the official announcement, but thanks to Joseph's careful planning with the trust, I remained largely anonymous. Local news referred to me only as the Oak Park Lottery winner or the lucky dog owner. There were requests for interviews from People magazine and The Ellen Show, all forwarded through my lawyer. A production company even inquired about movie rights to the heartwarming tale of a dog who created chaos and brought fortune. I declined them all, valuing my privacy over fame. Through it all, Rocky remained blissfully unaware that he was now famous. His concerns were still limited to walks, treats, and the occasional squirrel sighting. There was something grounding about his simple happiness, a reminder that the best things in life had nothing to do with bank balances. Your life is going to change. Joseph warned me. People will treat you differently. Some will want things from you. Others will resent you for having what they want. Be careful who you trust. I thought about his warning as I scrolled through my messages one night. A few former coworkers asking if I knew the Lucky Oak Park winner was. Some local businesses offering discounts, hoping to attract the mysterious millionaire. But nothing from my family. No text from my dad. No call from Linda. For now, my identity was still protected, and I was grateful for that. I set the phone down without responding. Some bridges couldn't be rebuilt with money. Some betrayals cut too deep. Instead, I focused on the good I could do. I paid off Marge's mortgage and hired contractors to fix her roof and plumbing. I tracked down Emily through the lottery commission and sent her a check for $10,000 as a thank you for those wet tickets that changed my life. 3 months after winning, the media frenzy had died down enough for me to start living again. Sarah had helped me find a modest but nice house in a quiet suburb with a big fenced yard for Rocky. Nothing flashy, nothing that screamed, "A millionaire lives here." Just a comfortable home where Rocky could chase squirrels without causing financial disasters. One evening, as I sat on my new back porch watching Rocky explore his yard, I felt a strange mix of gratitude and disbelief. 6 months ago, I'd been standing on my father's porch with nowhere to go. Now I had more money than I could spend in a lifetime, all because of a dog who couldn't resist chasing a cat. "You're my good luck charm, old boy," I told Rocky as he flopped down next to my chair, panting from his yard patrol. What should we do next? Rocky didn't answer, but he didn't need to. I already knew what came next. It was time to honor the promises I'd made, to myself, to Rocky, and most importantly, to Mom. The next day, I called Sarah and asked her to look into commercial real estate options in downtown Chicago, specifically restaurants for sale. "I thought we agreed on no drastic moves for 6 months," she reminded me. "This isn't drastic," I told her. "This is destiny." As I hung up, I looked at the framed photo of Mom I placed on my mantel. She was smiling, her arm around my teenage self. Rocky just a puppy in my arms. "We're doing it, Mom," I whispered. "We're making something good out of this, just like you taught me." The journey from homeless to millionaire had been wild and unexpected. But the real adventure, I suspected, was just beginning. Rocky and I had a future to build. And this time, nothing was going to stand in our way. 6 months after winning the lottery, I finally felt like I was finding my footing in my new reality. Living in a modest 3-bedroom house in a quiet Chicago suburb was a far cry from Marge's garage apartment, but I deliberately kept things simple. No mansion, no sports car collection, no gold-plated anything. Just a comfortable home with a massive fenced backyard where Rocky could run until his heart's content. The best part of having money, I discovered, wasn't what I could buy for myself. It was what I could do for others. Marge's house had undergone a complete transformation. New roof, updated plumbing, modern kitchen, and a state-of-the-art security system. I'd even added a custom-built doghouse in her backyard for Thor and Loki, complete with air conditioning for Chicago's brutal summer heat. You're officially my favorite grandson now, Marge joked one evening as we sat on her new back porch, watching the three dogs chase each other around the yard. Even if we're not actually related, I owe you more than I could ever repay, I told her, thinking of those first desperate nights after Dad kicked us out. You took in 2 strays when no one else would. Marge waved away my gratitude with a flick of her wrist. That's not how kindness works, kid. It's not a transaction. She took a sip of her iced tea and added, So what's next for you? All this money and no real plan seems like a recipe for disaster. That question had been haunting me for weeks. What was next? I couldn't just sit around being the lottery guy for the rest of my life. I needed purpose, direction, something that would make Mom proud. The answer came to me later that night as I was going through an old box of Mom's things that Dad had reluctantly dropped off after she died. At the bottom, beneath photo albums and her favorite scarf, I found a small leather-bound notebook. Inside, in Mom's neat handwriting, were recipes. Dozens of them. Pies, mostly. Apple crumble, cherry lattice, chocolate bourbon pecan. On the inside cover, she'd written, For my future cafe, sweet memories where every bite tells a story. I sat on my bedroom floor, stunned. I knew Mom had worked as a pastry chef before I was born, but I'd never known she'd dreamed of opening her own place. It was like finding a piece of her I never knew existed, a dream she'd never had the chance to fulfill. Right then, I knew what I needed to do. The next morning, I called Sarah, my financial advisor, to discuss investing in a small restaurant or cafe. She was skeptical at first. Restaurants were notoriously risky investments, especially for someone with zero experience in the industry. But when I explained about Mom's recipe book and her unfulfilled dream, Sarah softened. All right, but we do this smart, she said. Take some business classes. Find an experienced manager. Start small and learn the ropes before you dive in head first. I followed her advice, enrolling in business management and culinary courses at the local community college. During one of our consultations, Sarah mentioned casually, I heard through the grapevine that the Golden Fork is struggling financially. The owner is considering selling. My heart skipped a beat. The Golden Fork, where Rocky had caused chaos, where I'd been humiliated and fired. The universe couldn't possibly be that poetic, could it? How much are they asking? I heard myself say. 2 months and a mountain of paperwork later, I was the new owner of the Golden Fork. The previous owner, a silent investor who'd never even visited the restaurant, was thrilled to unload the struggling business. Frank, the manager who'd fired me, had no idea the sale had even happened. I decided to keep it that way. For now, my plan was to completely reimagine the space, transforming the stuffy, overpriced steakhouse into a warm, welcoming cafe featuring Mom's pie recipes as a star attraction. But first, I wanted one last moment of poetic justice. I made a reservation at the Golden Fork under a fake name, dressed in the nicest suit money could buy, and brought Rocky with me, this time with an official service dog vest. It wasn't exactly honest, but for what Frank had put me through, I figured a little white lie was justified. The maitre d' seated us at the best table in the house, not recognizing me with my new haircut and expensive clothes. Rocky miraculously behaved perfectly, lying quietly under the table as I ordered the most expensive items on the menu. Halfway through my appetizer, Frank appeared tableside, all smiles and faux sophistication. Is everything to your satisfaction, sir? He asked, not looking directly at me. I smiled. The food's excellent. Though I have to say, I've heard the management leaves something to be desired. That got his attention. He looked at me, really looked at me, and I watched his recognition dawn on his face. He went pale, then red, then pale again. You, he sputtered, you can't bring that dog in here. After what happened last time. Actually, I can, I interrupted calmly. Service dogs are protected by law. But more importantly, I pulled out a folded document from my jacket pocket and slid it across the table. I can bring him anywhere in this restaurant, considering I own it now. The look on Frank's face was worth every penny of the purchase price. His mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. You're fired? He finally managed to say more question than statement. I laughed and shook my head. No, Frank, you're not fired. You're on probation. I took a sip of my ridiculously overpriced wine. I believe in second chances. After all, someone gave me one once. The rest of the meal passed in a blur of awkward service and whispered conversations among the staff. By the time I left, the entire restaurant knew that the guy with the troublemaking dog had returned as their new boss. It wasn't about revenge. It was about coming full circle, about showing myself how far I'd come. The renovation started the following week. I closed the Golden Fork for a complete overhaul, keeping the staff on payroll during the downtime. Another decision that made Frank look at me like I'd grown a second head. Why would you pay people to not work? He asked as we reviewed the renovation plans. Because they have rent to pay and families to feed, I replied, and because loyalty goes both ways. As the renovation progressed, turning the dark, formal dining room into a bright, homey space with comfortable booths and a glass-encased bakery section, I found myself thinking more and more about Emily. I'd sent her that thank you check months ago, but hadn't heard back. Maybe she'd moved, or maybe she thought I was some weird lottery stalker. Still, I couldn't stop wondering what had happened to the girl whose lottery stand had changed my life. After some internal debate, I decided to try tracking her down again, just to say thank you in person. The lottery commission wouldn't give me any information about her, citing privacy policies. But they did confirm she no longer worked for them. On a hunch, I checked the bookstores near where her lottery stand had been. On my third try, a small independent shop called Turning Pages, I struck gold. There she was, shelving books in the fiction section, her brown hair now cut short in a stylish bob. For a moment, I just watched her work, suddenly unsure what to say. What if she didn't remember me? Worse, what if she remembered me as the guy whose dog destroyed her lottery tickets? I grabbed a random book from a nearby display and approached the counter. When Emily came over to ring me up, I waited for a flicker of recognition. Nice choice, she said, scanning the book. Though if you're into spy thrillers, the new Daniel Silva is better. She didn't recognize me at all. I'd gotten a haircut, replaced my glasses with contacts, and was wearing clothes that actually fit properly. But still, it stung a little. Thanks for the recommendation, I said, then added, I actually came in hoping to find you. Her head snapped up, wariness replacing her customer service smile. Excuse me? Sorry, that sounded creepy. I backpedaled quickly. I'm Jake. We met about 6 months ago when my dog Rocky knocked over your lottery stand. I paused. The wet tickets? I bought them all. The wariness transformed into shock, then amazement. Wait, you're the Oak Park lottery winner? The one with the dog story? I nodded, surprised she'd made the connection so quickly. I knew it, she exclaimed, smacking the counter. I knew those tickets were lucky. After you sent that check, I started putting the pieces together, but I couldn't find any way to contact you. Her enthusiasm was contagious. Well, you found me now, I said, smiling. Or I found you, I guess. We stood there grinning at each other, like idiots, until another customer cleared their throat behind me. I get off at 6, Emily said quickly, scribbling something on my receipt. If you want to grab coffee or something. I waited outside the bookstore until closing time, Rocky sitting patiently beside me. When Emily emerged, she immediately knelt down to pet him. So this is the $1 million dog, she said, scratching behind his ears while he thumped his tail against the sidewalk. I should be mad at him for almost getting me fired, but it's hard to stay angry at a face like this. We walked to a nearby cafe, where Emily insisted on buying my coffee. It's the least I can do for the guy who made me rich, she joked. Over lattes, I told her the whole story. About Mom, about getting kicked out, about Marge taking us in, about working at the Golden Fork and Rocky's disastrous encore performance that led to our meeting. And now you own the place? She asked, eyes wide. That's some serious karma. Not just own it. I'm completely transforming it. I explained, showing her pictures of the renovation on my phone. It's going to be a cafe called Mama's Pie Haven, featuring all my mom's recipes. Your mom would be so proud, Emily said softly, her hand resting lightly on mine. Something warm spread through my chest at her words, at the casual touch of her fingers on my skin. It had been so long since I connected with someone my own age, someone who saw me as just Jake, not as a lottery winner or the guy with the crazy dog. Our coffee date turned into dinner, and dinner turned into a walk along the lakefront with Rocky leading the way. Emily was easy to talk to, funny, smart, and completely unfazed by my sudden wealth. When I dropped her off at her apartment, I knew I wanted to see her again. Rocky and I are opening the cafe in 2 weeks, I said. Would you maybe want to come to the friends and family preview night? Emily smiled. I'd like that. Just keep Rocky away from any merchandise displays, okay? In the weeks that followed, Emily and I fell into a comfortable rhythm. She'd stop by the cafe after her shift at the bookstore, helping me test recipes and offering opinions on decor. She introduced me to her favorite authors, and I taught her how to make Mom's famous caramel apple pie. Rocky, for his part, was clearly smitten with her, something I completely understood. 3 days before the grand opening of Mama's Pie Haven, I was a nervous wreck. What if no one came? What if they hated the food? What if this whole thing was just a rich guy's vanity project doomed to failure? You need to breathe, Emily told me, forcing me to sit down in one of the booth seats. It's going to be amazing. How can you be so sure? I asked. She took my face in her hands. Because you're doing this for all the right reasons. Not for money, not for fame, for love, for your mom. That kind of intention has power. The night before our friends and family preview, I stayed late at the cafe, making sure everything was perfect. The pies were baked, the coffee machines primed, the staff trained. I kept Frank on as a host. He'd turned out to be surprisingly adaptable once he got over the shock of working for his former employee. As I did a final walkthrough, I stopped in front of the feature wall near the entrance. There, in a beautiful frame, was my favorite photo of Mom. She was standing in our old kitchen, flour dusting her cheeks, holding a perfect pie and beaming at the camera. Beside was a framed page from her recipe book, the apple pie that would be our signature dish. I designed the cafe exactly as I thought she would have wanted it. Warm colors, comfortable seating, a play area for kids in the corner, and a doggy patio outside where people could enjoy their treats with their four-legged friends. No pretension, no $80 steaks. Just good food made with love, and a place where everyone felt welcome. Rocky padded up beside me and sat, looking up at Mom's picture as if he recognized her. We did it, boy, I whispered, scratching his ears. We really did it. The preview night exceeded all my expectations. Marge came with Thor and Loki, all 3 dogs sporting bandanas with the cafe's logo. My business professors from a community college showed up with encouraging words and constructive feedback. Joseph, my lawyer, brought his entire family. Sarah, my financial advisor, proclaimed the bourbon pecan pie, worth every calorie. But the real highlight was watching Emily work the room, charming everyone she met, stepping in to help the waitstaff when things got hectic. She belonged there, somehow, as if she'd always been part of this dream. At the end of the night, after the last guest had left, I found myself standing alone in the middle of the cafe. Emily had gone to help the kitchen staff with final cleanup, and Rocky was snoozing under a booth after a long night of collecting pets and sneaking scraps. I looked around at what we created, at what Mom's dream had become. The warm lighting, the lingering smell of cinnamon and coffee, the chalkboard menu with her recipes listed in whimsical handwriting. It wasn't just a business. It was her legacy. I pulled the small photo of Mom I always carried in my wallet and held it up as if giving her a tour of the place. I did it, Mom. I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. Your cafe. Your recipes. Your dream. I could almost hear her response. No, Jake. This is your dream now. And it's just beginning. As I tucked the photo away, I knew she was right. This wasn't an ending. It was a new chapter. Tomorrow, Mama's Pie Haven would open its doors to the public. Rocky would greet customers, safely leashed and away from anything breakable. Emily would help me manage the inevitable chaos of opening day. And somewhere, somehow, I like to think Mom would be watching, pleased that her recipes were finally being shared with the world, but even more pleased that her son had found his way home, in every sense that mattered. Standing there in the quiet of the cafe, surrounded by the fruits of an unexpected journey, I felt something I hadn't experienced in a very long time. Peace. Complete, untroubled peace. It wouldn't last forever, of course. Life had taught me that happiness always comes with its own expiration date. But for now, for this moment, everything was exactly as it should be. And that was enough. A year flew by faster than I could have imagined. Mama's Pie Haven didn't just survive in Chicago's competitive restaurant scene. It thrived. What started as a personal tribute to Mom became a neighborhood institution, with lines out the door on weekends and write-ups in local food blogs praising our nostalgic flavors with modern twists. We expanded the menu beyond pies, adding Mom's other specialties. Cinnamon rolls that took 3 days to make properly, bread pudding topped with whiskey sauce, and cookies that customers claimed were better than their grandma's, though they'd never admit that to Grandma's face. Chicago Magazine named us Best New Cafe in their annual dining issue, and a Food Network show contacted us about a possible feature. Through it all, Rocky maintained his position as the cafe's unofficial mascot. He greeted regular customers like old friends, posed for countless Instagram photos, and wore a different themed bandana each day. The Rocky's Pick Special, a caramel apple pie with a hint of bacon in the crust, became our bestseller. Emily officially joined the business 6 months in, leaving her bookstore job to manage our front-of-house operations. She had a knack for remembering customer names and stories, creating the warm, welcoming atmosphere I'd always envisioned. With her running the floor and me overseeing the kitchen, we made a perfect team, in business and in life. I'd never believed in the concept of soulmates before meeting Emily. Growing up, I'd watched my parents' seemingly perfect marriage, only to see how quickly Dad replaced Mom after she was gone. But with Emily, something just clicked. She understood me in ways no one else did. My fears, my dreams, my weird obsession with 80s action movies. On our 1-year anniversary of meeting, or more accurately, of Rocky destroying her lottery stand, I decided to make it official. I spent weeks planning the proposal, wanted to make it perfect without being cliché. In the end, I kept it simple, just us Rocky and the first batch of caramel apple pie we'd ever baked together. I'd attached the ring to Rocky's collar with a small tag that read, "Will you marry my human?" Emily laughed, then cried, then tackled me in a hug that nearly knocked us both to the floor. Rocky, thinking this was a new game, joined in, covering both our faces with slobbery kisses. We decided on a short engagement. 6 months to plan a small ceremony in the garden behind Marge's house. With her officiating, she'd gotten certified online specifically for us. The cafe became engagement central, with regular customers offering congratulations and unsolicited wedding advice. Rocky strutted around with an air of accomplishment, as if the whole thing had been his idea from the start. Life was good, better than I'd ever imagined possible when I stood on Dad's porch that night with nowhere to go. Sometimes I catch myself looking around the cafe, at Emily chatting with customers, at Rocky napping in a special corner, at the photo of Mom watching over it all, and I'd feel a wave of gratitude so intense it was almost overwhelming. The only shadow on my happiness was the absence of Dad. Despite everything, there were moments I wish he could see what I'd built, what his son had become. Not for validation. I was past needing that from him. But because somewhere deep down, I still remember the man who taught me to ride a bike and cheered at my baseball games. The man who existed before grief turned him into someone I didn't recognize. I thought about reaching out dozens of times, but always stopped myself. The hurt was still too raw, the memory of that night on the porch too vivid. Besides, I wasn't even sure he'd want to know about my success. He'd made his choice, and I'd made mine. It happened on a Tuesday afternoon in April. We were short-staffed because 2 servers had called in sick, so I was helping on the floor, something I occasionally did anyway to stay connected with our customers. I was refilling coffee at a corner table when the bell above the door chimed. Looking up, I saw 2 people enter the cafe and nearly dropped the coffee pot. Dad and Linda stood in the doorway, looking exactly as they had 2 years ago. Her with the same perfectly styled hair and designer outfit, him with the same tired eyes and slumped shoulders of a man living someone else's life. I knew I should move, say something, but my feet felt rooted to the floor. It was Dad who saw me first. His eyes widened in shock. "Jake?" he said, his voice a mix of surprise and uncertainty. Linda followed his gaze, her expression shifting from boredom to surprise to something like disdain. "Well," she said, recovering quickly, "so this is where you ended up. A waiter. I suppose it's honest work, at least." Something about her condescending tone snapped me back to reality. I set down the coffee pot and approached them, professional smile firmly in place. "Welcome to Mama's Pie Haven," I said, as if greeting any other customers. "Table for two?" Dad looked confused by my businesslike manner, clearly expecting either a warm reunion or cold rejection. Not this neutral professionalism. "Jake, we had no idea you worked here," he said, still standing awkwardly by the door. "We just heard this place had great pies." "We have the best in Chicago," I replied, grabbing two menus. "Right this way." I led them to a table in the corner, far from other customers. As I handed them the menus, Rocky trotted over from his special spot near the kitchen. He'd been napping but must have sensed my tension. The moment Linda saw him, her face contorted into a mask of disgust. "You still got that dog? And they let you bring it to work?" Rocky recognized him instantly. He didn't growl, but his entire body stiffened, eyes fixed on Linda with unmistakable recognition. "This establishment allows dogs." Linda's voice rose sharply, drawing the attention of nearby customers. "That's a clear health code violation. I'd like to speak to the manager immediately." "Linda," Dad hissed, clearly embarrassed by her outburst. "No, Richard," she snapped back. "First, he brings this flea bag to our home and ruins my things. Now he's bringing it to work? Someone needs to teach this boy about proper boundaries." I remained calm, years of customer service experience coming in handy. "I'll get the manager for you right away." As I walked toward the back office, I could hear Linda's stage whisper to Dad, "Waiting tables. Well, at least now we know why he never came back begging for help." Frank was doing inventory when I stuck my head in. "Hey, can you come out front for a minute? My father and stepmother just walked in. They think I'm a waiter, and she's demanding to speak to management about Rocky being here." Frank's eyebrows shot up. "The ones who kicked you out? Oh, this I gotta see." We returned to the table together, Rocky following at my heels. Linda was inspecting the silverware with a critical eye while Dad studied the menu, looking uncomfortable. "I understand there's a concern about our canine friend here," Frank asked in his most professional voice. Linda looked up. "Are you the manager? Your employee has brought his pet to work. It's unsanitary and highly unprofessional." Frank glanced at me, the corner of his mouth twitching slightly. "I think there's been a misunderstanding, ma'am. Jake is an employee. He's the owner of Mama's Pie Haven." The silence that followed was so profound you could have heard a crumb drop. Dad's menu slipped from his fingers. Linda's mouth opened and closed several times before she managed to speak. "Owner," she repeated, as if the word were in a foreign language. "That's impossible. He's just a college dropout." I finished for her. "A guy who chose a dog over a roof over his head? Yeah, that's me. I'm also the owner of this place, and Rocky here is our unofficial mascot. The health department has no issues with him being here, as long as he stays out of the kitchen, which he does." Dad was staring at me like I'd grown a second head. "Jake, how could you afford to?" "The lottery," I said simply. "Turns out getting kicked out was the best thing that ever happened to me. Because of Rocky." I patted his head affectionately. "I ended up with a winning Mega Millions ticket. Ironic, isn't it? The dog you wanted me to get rid of made me a millionaire." Linda's face transformed instantly, her previous disgust melting into a saccharine smile. "Oh, how wonderful. You know, we've been so worried about you, Jake. Richard has been beside himself wondering where you were." "Really?" I couldn't keep the skepticism from my voice. "So worried that you never once came looking for me at Marge's? Or called the community college to see if I was still enrolled?" Dad at least had the decency to look ashamed. I thought you needed space. That you'd come back when you were ready." "Come back?" I repeated, keeping my voice low despite the anger bubbling up. You kicked me out for choosing Mom's final gift to me over your new wife's designer handbag. What exactly was I supposed to come back to? Emily appeared at my side, sensing the tension. She slipped her hand into mine, the diamond on her finger catching the light. "Everything okay here?" she asked, her voice gentle but her eyes watchful. "Emily, these are my father and Linda." I said, "Dad, this is Emily, my fiancée." Dad's expression softened. "Fiancé? You're getting married?" "In the fall," Emily confirmed with a warm smile. "Small ceremony in Marge's garden. She's getting ordained online just for us." Linda, ever the social chameleon, immediately shifted her attention to Emily. "How lovely. You simply must tell us all about your plans. Perhaps we could help with the arrangements. I know the most exquisite venue in Lake Forest." "We've got it covered." I interrupted. "Like Emily said, it's going to be small, just close friends and family." The word family hung in the air between us, its meaning complicated by our history. Dad looked genuinely hurt, while Linda's smile never faltered, though her eyes turned cold. "Jake," Dad began, "I know things ended badly, but we're still family. I've missed you. Maybe this could be a fresh start for all of us." Before I could respond, Linda cut in. "Richard's right. Let's put the past behind us. We should celebrate your success. Perhaps you could come over for dinner this weekend? I'd love to hear all about how you started this charming little place." I almost laughed at her transparent pivot. 2 minutes ago, I was a lowly waiter with a dirty dog. Now that she knew I had money, I was suddenly worth knowing again. "The cafe was Mom's dream," I said, watching Dad's reaction carefully. "I found her recipe book after she died. Every pie here is hers." Dad's eyes drifted to the wall behind them, the wall dedicated to Mom, with her smiling face surrounded by framed pages from her recipe book. His expression crumpled as he recognized her handwriting. "She always wanted to open a place like this," he said softly. "She talked about it all the time." "I know," I replied. "That's why I did it." Linda, realizing she was losing ground, started gathering her purse. "Richard, we should go. We have that appointment, remember?" Dad hesitated, looking torn. For a moment, I thought he might choose differently this time, might choose his son and the memory of his late wife over Linda's demands. But some patterns are too deeply ingrained to break in a single confrontation. "Your mom will be so proud of you, Jake," he said, rising slowly. "This place, it's exactly what she would have wanted." I nodded, accepting this small offering of approval. That was the idea. As they headed toward the door, I remembered something Mom used to say whenever family was discussed. "True family stands by you when you're at your lowest, not just when you're easy to love." "Dad," I called after him. He turned, hand on the door. "Mom always said that real family stands by you when you're at your lowest." I found that family after you kicked me out. With Marge, with Emily, even with Rocky. People who chose me when I had nothing to offer. Dad's expression crumpled, the weight of my words hitting him squarely. Linda tugged at his arm impatiently, but he shook her off. "I made a mistake that night, Jake," he admitted, his voice breaking. "The biggest mistake of my life. I know it's too late, but I'm sorry." Then they were gone, the bell chiming their exit. Emily squeezed my hand. "You okay?" she asked softly. I considered the question carefully. Was I okay? I just confronted the two people who'd thrown me out when I needed them most. By all rights, I should be angry, bitter, or at least shaken. But I wasn't. Looking around at what I'd built, this warm, welcoming space filled with Mom's recipes and spirit, with Rocky curled contentedly nearby, with Emily's hand in mine, I felt something unexpected. Peace. "Yeah," I replied. "I'm more than okay." A week later, an envelope arrived addressing me at the cafe. Inside was a worn photo of Mom, Dad, and me at a baseball game when I was about 10. Mom was laughing, her arm around my shoulders. On the back, Dad had written, "If you ever want to talk about her, about anything, I'm here. No pressure, no Linda. Just family." I slipped the photo into frame on my desk, Next to the picture of Emily, Rocky, and me outside the cafe, past and present, side by side. Not everything had been fixed in that single encounter, nor should it be. Some wounds take time to heal, if they ever do, but a door had been opened, just a crack. The rest of the month passed in a blur of wedding planning, cafe operations, and Rocky's continued social media fame. By the time summer arrived, the encounter with Dad and Linda had taken on a dreamlike quality, like something that happened in another lifetime. On a perfect June evening, Emily, Rocky, and I stood outside the cafe after closing, looking up at the illuminated sign, Mama's Pie Haven, where every bite tells a story. The sky was painted in shades of pink and gold as the sun set over Chicago. "What are you thinking about?" Emily asked, leaning her head against my shoulder. I thought about the long, strange journey that had led us here, about standing on Dad's porch with nothing but a backpack and a dog, about Marge taking in 2 strays when no one else would, about Rocky chasing a cat through an upscale restaurant and knocking over a lottery stand, about wet tickets drying on every surface of a tiny garage apartment. "I'm thinking that life isn't about what you lose," I said finally. "It's about what you build from what remains." Rocky, as if sensing the importance of the moment, pressed himself against my leg. Emily's engagement ring caught the last rays of sunlight, sending tiny rainbows dancing across the sidewalk. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new chances to make Mom proud. Dad's note sat in my desk drawer, a bridge I wasn't quite ready to cross but no longer wanted to burn. The cafe would open at 7 a.m. as always, serving Mom's recipes to a line of loyal customers. Life would go on, richer and fuller than I could have imagined that night on the porch. Some might call it luck. Others might call it fate. But I knew the truth. It was love, messy, inconvenient, loyal love, that had brought us here. The kind of love Mom had always believed in. The kind that chooses a dog over comfort, kindness over convenience, and finds family in the most unexpected places. And that, more than any lottery win, was the real jackpot.